2, 3, 4.
With City winning their 4th consecutive Premier League title and winning 6 of the last 7 of them, how is the Premier League not a farmers league? Because time and time and time again, you hear Bundesliga, farmers league, Ligue 1, farmers league, and some even go as far as to say La Liga, farmers league. Well, to those people I say Premier League, farmers league, because at this point, the amount of mental gymnastics one has to do to, on the one hand, argue that the Bundesliga and Liga are farmers leagues because of the dominance of one team in that league. Yet when City do the exact same thing in the Premier League, you look away and pretend as though there's nothing to see, shows a level of cognitive dissonance that is truly unparalleled anywhere else. To put things into perspective, since 2018, both PSG and Man City have won the exact same amount of league titles. And looking further back, since 2010, both the Premier League and Ligue 1 have had the same amount of league winners with 5 apiece. And looking further back still, since the turn of the millennium, Ligue 1 has had the most league winners out of all the European top 5 leagues, with 7 different French clubs lifting the Ligue 1 trophy since the year 2000, namely PSG, Lille, Monaco, Montpellier, Nantes, Bordeaux, and Marseille. Ligue 1 is then followed by the Premier League and the Bundesliga with 6 winners, with City, Liverpool, Chelsea, Leicester, United, and Arsenal for the Premier League, and Leverkusen, Bayern, Dortmund, Stuttgart, Wolfsburg, and Werder Bremen for the Bundesliga. The Serie A follows them with its 5 winners, Inter, Napoli, Milan, Juve, and Roma, and La Liga comes in last with its 4 winners, Real, Barca, Atletico, and Valencia. And all this was aggregated into a study done by Ticketcom, which looked to determine the most competitive of the European top 5 leagues from the 2009-10 season to the 2018-19 season. In this study, they looked at a variety of metrics. 1, the variety of league winners. 2, the average points gap between the best and worst teams in the league. 3, the average percentage of possible points won by the league champions. And 4, the number of promoted teams that were relegated after just 1 season. Taking all these metrics into account, they awarded points to each of the leagues based on their ranking in each particular metric. And from this, they determined that Ligue 1, yes, Ligue 1, was the most competitive of the European top 5 leagues. It was then followed by the Bundesliga, the Premier League in 3rd, and the Liga and Serie A came in 4th and 5th place respectively. Now, to all those keyboard warriors getting ready to comment,
This data is out of date. How could you possibly use this to come up with any conclusions?
well, to that I say, I did some calculations of my own, and I looked from the 2019-20 season onwards to our current 2023-2024 season that's just gone. And in this time frame, looking at the number of league winners, the Premier League performs quite averagely, with its 2 league winners in City and Liverpool, right in line with Ligue 1 and its 2 winners, PSG and Lille, as well as the Bundesliga and its 2 winners, Bayern and Leverkusen. La Liga comes in 2nd with its 3 winners in this time frame, Real, Barca, and Atletico, and Serie A tops the list with its 4 winners in the last 5 seasons, with Inter, Napoli, Milan, and Juve all winning the Scudetto. Another metric in which the Premier League actually fares quite well in is the points difference between the winners and the runners-up, or in other words, how likely there is to be a title race in each league, with the Premier League being tied for 1st with Ligue 1 for the lowest average points difference between the winners and the runners-up, with an average points difference of 7.6. La Liga is 2nd with an average points difference of 8.4. Serie A is 3rd with an average points difference of 10 points, and the Bundesliga comes in last with an average points gap of 10.2 points between the winners and the runners-up. And well, that's about it in terms of statistics that favors this narrative that the Premier League is the most competitive league. And this whole idea that any team can beat any team is also bogus, as when looking at the points difference between the runners-up and the 3rd place teams, the Premier League ranks dead last among the European top 5 leagues with an average points gap of 11.4 points between 2nd and 3rd. It's then followed by La Liga with an average points gap of 8.4, Ligue 1 with an average of 5.8, and finally the Bundesliga and Serie A with an average points gap of 3.6 points between 2nd and 3rd. This myth is further disproven by the fact that the Premier League boasts the highest difference in goal difference between the best and worst teams, with an average difference of 104.2 goals. And finally, to put the final nail in the coffin, if we look at the average percentage of possible points won by the league winners in each of the top 5 leagues, which, to explain using City's Centurion season as an example, if we take the total amount of points City got that season, 100, and divide this by the total number of points they could get, 114, which comes from the fact that they played 38 games and obviously each game can get a maximum of 3 points. Dividing these two numbers and multiplying by 100 to get a percentage gives you the percentage of possible points won by City's Centurions of 87.7%. Now, at first glance, this number may not really mean much, but putting it into context, assuming you can only win or lose games in the league season, winning 87.7% of the points mean that roughly over the run of 9 games, you're winning 8 of them. 8. And you're doing so over the course of the entire season. If that doesn't scream dominance to you, I don't know what does. Because as impressive as it may be for the team that manages to accomplish this feat, what this says about the league more broadly is that the league, at least as it pertains to the winner, is not all that competitive. If one team is able to cruise their way to the title with nearly 88% of the possible points, it means that they lacked any real competition over the course of the season. Alright, now that I've explained what this stat is and how it should be interpreted, if we look at the percentage of possible points won by the league winners across all the top 5 leagues for the last 5 seasons and average them out, the Premier League ranks number 1, baby, with the average Premier League winners getting a staggering 80.9% of the possible points available to them over the course of the season. La Liga comes in second, with their winners on average getting 79.6% of the possible points. The Bundesliga is third, with their winners getting 79.2% of the possible points. Serie A is fourth, with their winners averaging 78.6% of the points. And funnily enough, Ligue 1 is fifth, with its winners only getting 77% of the points. So what this tells us, over the last 5 seasons at least, is that not only is Ligue 1 more competitive than most people make it out to be, but that in actuality, Man City dominate the Premier League more so than PSG dominate Ligue 1. And with the fact that the Premier League winners on average get a larger share of the possible points, a strong case could be made that the Premier League is in fact the least competitive of the European top 5 leagues, and therefore the farmiest of farmers' leagues. And with everything I've just said, I've already anticipated what all the Premier League apologists are getting ready to type out in the comments. They're probably saying, the term Farmers League isn't referring to the competitiveness of the league. It has to do with the overall quality of the league. Ah, yes. The quality of the league. Now, don't get me wrong, I think the Premier League overall is the highest quality league of the European top 5 leagues, meaning that if in some hypothetical world, every team from each of the top 5 leagues were to compete against each other in a league, where each team plays each other home and away, I think that the average position of the Premier League teams would be the highest among the European top 5 leagues. However, I don't think that the gap would be as big as some of the Premier League glazers out there will have you believing. To prove my point, let's do a case study of how the English teams performed on the European stage this season. Bar Aston Villa this season, no English team managed to reach the semi-finals of any of the European competitions, with both City and Arsenal getting knocked out by Real and Bayern respectively in the Champions League, with Arsenal losing to arguably one of the weakest Bayern sides in recent history, with the Bavarian side going trophyless for the first time since 2012. Liverpool got cooked by Atalanta in the quarterfinals of the Europa League. West Ham got thumped by Leverkusen, and Brighton got humbled by Roma, the same Brighton which had Premier League defenders saying this.
Yeah, but I think Brighton would win Serie A.
Do you think?
I think they'd contend.
They'd definitely be in the top 4, wouldn't they?
Oh, and how could I forget the fact that both Newcastle and United got grouped in the Champions League as well. All of this whilst even the most modest of Premier League sides enjoys the spending power equivalent to or greater than most of the established European juggernauts. To put things into perspective, the Premier League brings in double the revenue of the second biggest league after it, and the average Premier League team has a wage bill that is double that of its closest competitor. For example, Luton Town's wage bill last season was greater than half of La Liga teams. Half! And that's not even to mention just how ridiculously prize money is for Premier League clubs. Last year, 20th place Southampton made 50 million more pounds than La Liga champions Barcelona. 50 million more pounds. And that gets me onto my final point regarding the quality of Premier League clubs on the European stage. People often mock PSG, and rightfully so to a certain degree, for not having won the Champions League despite all the money they spent on their squad. Yet, when Premier League clubs earn several times what other teams in other leagues do, and yet still do not dominate on the European stage, we don't say anything. And I'm not talking about the Champions League, because at least there, Premier League clubs are rivaled financially by other European juggernauts like PSG, Bayern, Real, and Barcelona, etc, etc. No. I'm talking about the Europa League and the Conference League, where clubs like Liverpool, West Ham, Aston Villa probably have 3 times the operating budget of every team in their group combined, and yet still fail to utterly dominate these competitions. But when PSG fail to win the Champions League, despite competing with teams which are able to match it financially, people are quick to mock PSG and ridicule them. Listen, I don't really have a problem with people calling other leagues Farmers League, so long as they are consistent and clear with their use of the term. If they say it has to do with the competitiveness of the league and how dominant one team in that league is, then if they are to be intellectually consistent, they would also have to assign the Farmers League title to the Premier League as well. Because as I've shown previously, not only is it that the Premier League is not the most competitive of the European top 5 leagues, but from the statistics I showed, it can be argued that the Premier League is the least competitive of the European top 5 leagues. And if you want to argue that the term refers to the quality of the leagues, which I think is probably the stronger case to make, even though I would agree that the Premier League is indeed the highest quality league, going from that to saying that if you're not one of the best 3 leagues in the world, it's not that you're a lesser league. Oh no, you're a Farmers League. As in, considering these leagues to be professional leagues is to make a mockery of the sport. Now, if this kind of thinking isn't emblematic of football elitism and narcissism, I truly don't know what is. Calling 99% of leagues out there Farmers Leagues and being the one who decides the criteria for what is and isn't a Farmers League is the epitome of self-entitlement. But anyways, with all that being said, I'd be curious to see just how the Premier League apologists are going to defend their oh so precious Premier League after this one.